everyone. In today's video for marketing, we are going to be looking at marketing channels and supply chains. And I know when most people think of marketing, they think of things that are a little more glamorous, like advertising campaigns and branding and things like that. But of the 4 P's of the marketing mix, one of them stands for place. And that's a shorthand way of saying that the distribution of goods from being produced all the way through getting into the consumer's hand is a function of the marketing department in your organization. We use these two terms somewhat interchangeably, marketing channels and supply chains. There's a slight difference between them. A marketing channel is really all of the people and organizations that are helping to decide how these goods are going to be moved. And the supply chain itself are the people who actually do the moving, the truck drivers and the people who work in the warehouses. But in general, they're complementary terms. They mean generally the same thing, and I'll use them interchangeably throughout this video. Now, one of the best examples I can give you of a supply chain snafu happened in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so we might as well use that because it's a great example. All of a sudden, consumers ran out to this supermarket and stocked up on toilet paper. And for a while, it was really hard to find toilet paper in the supermarket. And a lot of people said, well, why is this? And actually, toilet paper is a product that in the United States we actually make right here. It's not like we're importing it from overseas, unlike many other products. So why couldn't the toilet paper manufacturers simply ramp up production and get that toilet paper to the supermarkets? Well, part of the reason is that toilet paper demand is very constant. You don't normally have serious changes in increases or decreases. Retailers, wholesalers, producers generally know exactly how much toilet paper is going to be consumed every month, everywhere, and it doesn't change a lot. The change that COVID brought was that, first of all, people were hoarding and were snatching it up, but also the nature of the retail outlets, the end consumers, changed significantly. Toilet paper in an industrial setting, such as schools, restaurants, gas station bathrooms, that's a very different toilet paper product than the kind that people buy for their home use. And the machinery is different. And all of the papers are different that go into that process. And as people moved away from institutional use and towards more home use, the companies that made institutional toilet paper couldn't just change overnight. They couldn't change their machines. So you ended up, it's not just a question of, well, just make more of it. If you ask a supermarket about their SKUs for toilet paper, and that stands for stock keeping units, there are 65 SKUs in most supermarkets for toilet paper, and that means they're packaged in 2, or in 4, or in 6, or in 8, or in 12, or in 36. And they're 2-ply, or they're extra long, or they're extra soft, or they're this company, or they're that company. 65 different ways to order toilet paper. It's not just a question of make more toilet paper. It's a very complicated process, and we're going to look at how complicated that process is during the course of this video and in the other supplemental material that I've added to this lesson. Now, in looking at the chain of getting goods into a consumer's hand, there are 4 basic models. Each one is more complex. The first one, which is the easiest to understand, is the producer to consumer model. So you may have seen some chickens around my feet a few minutes ago. If I was to sell my eggs directly to consumers at a farm stand right out front here, that is a producer to consumer model. I don't have to worry about middlemen. I don't have to worry about dealing with a lot of other institutions besides my customers. But it can also be inefficient because I'm the one who has to be here if a consumer comes and wants to purchase the product. And I've got to be the one to fulfill that order. It's usually okay for a small volume of product. It's much harder to do when you get larger volumes of product. People who make crafts or jewelry and sell it on their personal website, they are involved in a producer to consumer model. And it works, but it only works so long. The second step up, the second model, is the producer to retailer to consumer model. And that's actually what I do. We take our eggs every week, we bring them to the local general store, the retailer buys them from me, and then they sell them to consumers. It's a very convenient model. I don't have to be home all the time wondering when a consumer is going to drop by to buy eggs, and I don't have to worry about how many sales I'll have this week. I sell my eggs to the retailer, and then consumers can go to that retailer when it's convenient for them and purchase the eggs. I'm involved in one delivery, I get one check, and it's over. It's a very convenient model for me, very efficient. If that store was to go out of business, or if that store was to decide not to carry my product anymore, there'd be a serious disruption in that model. So as we get larger, and as you have more goods and services, and you want to expand beyond your local geography, that's when we get into more complicated models. And the third one, which is one of the most common ones, is the producer to wholesaler to retailer to consumer model. You've got 4 steps here. And what that means is that I am using an intermediary. And an intermediary is probably a broader term and better than wholesaler. But what it would mean is that we would take our product and we would send it to someone whose business it is to collect lots of products and then to distribute them to lots of different places. So let's talk a little bit about the intermediary, because in large businesses and medium-sized businesses, these are going to be the key players in the supply chain. Imagine going into supermarkets, and maybe Shaw's supermarket wants to buy, they want to order Oscar Mayer bacon and Johnsonville andouille and Jimmy Dean breakfast sausage. It would be very complicated if Shaw's supermarket had to place a separate order with Jimmy Dean and Johnsonville and Oscar Mayer, and then the Hannaford supermarket down the road was also placing their own orders with Oscar Mayer and Jimmy Dean and Johnsonville, and then the A&P down the road a little further is doing the same thing. That's a very inefficient system. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of orders, there's a lot of places where things can get confused or orders get dropped. So what they'll use is an intermediary. And somewhere there is a company that brings together all these packaged meat products for the purpose of selling them to supermarkets. So all of these small meat packaging companies, the Jimmy Deans and the Johnsonvilles, they will just sell all of their product to the intermediary, who has the facilities to warehouse and to keep things at the right temperature, and they keep a large inventory. And then when Shaw's or Hannaford's or A&P needs all of these different packaged meat products, they go to one place and they order everything they need from this one place. In terms of efficiency, it's a great model, because you're not on the phone all day placing orders with 20 different suppliers. You call up one intermediary, you ask for all 20 goods, knowing that that intermediary probably has all of these goods in stock they can load them on a truck and get them out to your store. Now, just because it's efficient and it's the most common business model in the US doesn't mean that it doesn't have problems. For instance, if you're the small producer, if you make something and you really haven't penetrated the market very well yet, or you don't have a lot of customers, the intermediary is probably not going to want to deal with you. They don't mind bringing in 1 million units of some good from some major manufacturer that's going to be distributed to hundreds of different retail outlets. But if it's just you, if it's just a small producer, they don't want to use warehouse space to bring something in and clog up their computer systems with something that very few places even know about. So if you're a little guy, it is very easy to get locked out of this mass distribution system. And if you go to a store and you're looking for a particular product and they say, no, we don't carry that, maybe you'll push them and say, can you order it? And they may push back and say, no, we can't. And they can't because their intermediary, their supplier, isn't carrying that product, and they're getting all of their order from that one intermediary. So the small guy can get lost, and that's a big problem with this system. Now, there are ways around it. The gold standard of the way around it is Amazon. Amazon has, whether you like them or hate them, they have created a system where the little guy can use Amazon, who is an intermediary, to stock, ship, and process orders. Even if maybe you wrote a book and you got 50 copies of it because you self-published it, you can sell it through Amazon. That's an intermediary that has worked big time for small people, for small businesses, and it enables you to use that intermediary system without having to rely on volumes of millions of units of goods. Another way to do that is very often, and this is common in agriculture, small producers will get together and create their own intermediary. You may have seen in this area, Cabot Creamery. Cabot Creamery is a cooperative owned by lots of small farmers. And what it does is it buys the milk, it amasses milk from hundreds of farms into one large operation. Same thing for Ocean Spray Cranberry. Ocean Spray Cranberry is really not this big corporation. Ocean Spray is a farmers cooperative, and you've got hundreds of farmers who grow cranberries who have to move this in a very time-sensitive fashion. It's got to be picked at the right time. It's got to be moved to the markets at the right time, especially around Thanksgiving. So they got together and created their own intermediary and named it Ocean Spray. So they know all of their cranberries are going to one place, and then that one place is selling Ocean Spray products to all the major supermarket chains in the United States. Another example of this would be Juan Valdez Coffee. Hundreds of small coffee growers in Colombia found they couldn't compete with the huge corporate intermediary chains. So they got together and created their own, called Profecal. And Profecal is their marketing intermediary to sell coffee and coffee beans throughout the Western Hemisphere. So there is that way around it. Now, there's other problems associated with using an intermediary, and that is the conflict that occurs when your distribution strategy conflicts with what the intermediary wants to do. So let's look a little bit at these strategies. For some people, their strategy is going to be what we call an intensive distribution, meaning I've got a product and I want to get this product everywhere that will sell it. Well, if you're working with an intermediary, that's going to work out really well for you because they're going to take your product and then whoever they can sell it to, retail-wise, they're going to do that. And if that's your strategy, that works really well. If your strategy is an exclusive distribution, that means you're only selling to one retailer. When you hear someone say, our product is available exclusively at, I don't know, maybe you make radar systems or GPS systems for boats, and you want this to be so exclusive that you only sell it through West Marine. Well, if that's what you're doing, you don't need an intermediary, so you just sell directly to West Marine. The problem comes when you have what's called a selective distribution system, which is somewhere between intensive, everybody, and exclusive, one outlet. Selective means you want your product in certain types of stores. So a good example of this would be, a number of years ago, a lady named Dina Mohajer in California started a business called Hard Candy, and it was fingernail polish. And as her business grew, she wanted this distributed through upscale chains like Nordstrom's or even a Macy's, Sephora. She wanted fairly upscale image for her product. Well, she used an intermediary. She sold all her goods to this intermediary, and one of the intermediary's clients or business partners was Walmart. So she wanted a selective distribution for her products in upscale stores, and it ended up in Walmart. That's a problem because you want to control the location of your product and where it's sold, because that feeds into your brand image. And so if you've decided your business has gotten too big and you need to distribute through channels that include intermediaries so that you don't have to worry about it, you need to make sure your intermediaries are selling to the locations where you want your product and not across the board. So that's the third model. The fourth and the most complicated model puts at least 5 different players in the game. And that is the producer to the agent, to the intermediary, to the retailer, to the consumer. What the agent is, an agent is usually an independent business person whose job it is to find the right intermediaries for you and for your product. They usually get paid by commission. So if they've placed your product in certain marketing channels and certain supply chains, they get a fee from you. It can be useful in that you can have a little more control over the intermediaries that are carrying your product. You have someone else doing the work for you, so it's a little more efficient if you don't have the time to do that right. It does add another player in this long chain. Now, so far, we've only talked about chain from the producer to the consumer, and you can see there's a lot of steps in here, and a lot of places where there can be problems, and it's very often hard to break into one of these chains. But there is also a chain leading up to production. In other words, producers just don't have raw materials and everything they need sitting in front of them. They need to be able to pull together all the raw materials and all the goods they need to make the product. So they've got a supply chain that stretches back. One example of that would be pencils. You see, okay, well, someone makes pencils. Big deal, they make it at their factory. Well, not really, because they're importing cedar wood. They're importing graphite. They're ordering paint. They're ordering the metal for the ring that goes around the pencil. They're ordering erasers that are made of rubber. Each one of these has a supply line that goes back further, because that rubber didn't come from a rubber tree growing in Georgia. It probably came from Indonesia. The graphite was mined somewhere else. the cedar trees were growing somewhere and cut down by someone using some type of equipment. These supply lines are vast, and it's one of the reasons why supply chains are so complicated, and why simple things like a boat grounding in the Suez Canal, or a pandemic, or a weather event like a tornado, any one of these things can cause serious disruption to supply lines. Now, we're going to go on a little trip right now. The agent model is a model that a clothing company in New York called Nanette Lepore uses. They are a fashion designer, and they have fashion designers, and they design clothing, and they sell clothing. They use a lot of American-made manufacturers. But in order to make the clothing, they just don't make it all there on site. There are, in making a simple piece of clothing, in the video that we're about to see, they're putting together the basic cloth, they're putting on trim, they're putting on buttons. There's a lot of pieces that go into it. And so they used an agent to find the right mills to manufacture the pieces that they could finally put together for a finished product. And you're going to see, as we take this little trip to Nanette Lepore, having an agent do the work for them causes as many problems as it solves. So let's take a trip to the Garment District in New York City.
So this is our 430.
Oh wow!
This is our 430, and we're actually making this now, and we'll ship at the end of the month. So, as you probably can't really notice it here, but you might notice it a little bit more here. This is one quality, and this is another quality. So there's an animal, and then this is a circle. So we like to pick the same manufacturer to produce the same quality, because the color will come out a little bit more correctly than having it with two different mills. We had an experience where the agent never informed us that it's two different mills making two different fabrics, so the colors never matched. And we had, at the end they had to fix it, and they did what they had to do.
They base it on a die number?
The Pantone number?
Submit, well, I don't know if Nanette does Pantone. I think she does really her own.
She doesn't do Pantone. Sometimes she'll just find a little piece of fabric and she'll say, I want that color, and that becomes standard. Sometimes it's a piece of yarn.
Yeah.
She doesn't follow Pantone.
Right now had to change a yarn. I had to tell a fabric supplier, well, here's a yarn and I need this color fabric.
That's
which is interesting, and you know, but they brought back to me. So this is for an example, and everything is very particular down to the button to match and lining to match, and then, well, this is sheet, but on some other...
This is actually a good thing of what it should not look like, because if you notice how the blues don't match, if this was production, that would be rejected. But I mean, for sampling, we have to just dye it here, so...
Which we have a dye lab in the back.
Yes, which
and
are interns.
hand dye it.
Learn how to hand dye it.
Awesome.
Yes.
And then what we normally do is design will work with sales and myself, and we take one fabric off the line, and it should be like, whether it be a base cotton or base poly, whatever it is, and that's the standard each and every mill gets that has the color, that they have to color coordinate to. And then the trim works around that same swatch. And then they submit lab dips, head of sales will approve a design, the lab dip color, and the lab dip must match production. 9 out of 10 times we give color allowance, but I don't give a big color allowance. They have to pretty much match it.